So I'd like to call upon the dais Miss Nancy Messing of South Africa. She is the chairperson of Cape Astrology Association and a very famous Western astrologer. Her lecture topic is the old and the new, Saturn and Uranus.
Afternoon, everybody. When we had this little yank with the microphone, I thought, wow, we're in the energy of Saturn Uranus now. So off we go. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as great and sudden change. This statement was made by Mary Shelley, the author of the novel Frankenstein. She captured the spirit of the radical polar opposites, Saturn, Uranus. Whilst all planetary combinations and pairs are important in the studies of astrology, a few produce especially jarring, challenging results, as we experienced a few minutes ago. The mixture and themes associated with grim old Saturn and rebel Uranus certainly is one such pair. And I found it quite befitting at a conference where West meets East. In today's talk, a slight overview here, we'll be looking at Saturn and Uranus respectively, their complex interaction, their individual and combined cycles, and a few examples, mere few of the many examples of manifestations, focusing primarily on global events, in particular financial in the financial and political arena, and some personalities, people born with this imprint, and finally conclude to their contribution to our personal and collective evolution. Traditionally, prior to the discovery of Uranus, Saturn was the most distant planet in our solar system, and as such represented the outer limits, the end and the boundary of our known universe and reality. Its mythological Greek equivalent, Kronos, the god of time, we get from him chronology, and linear time, therefore also aging. The Saturnian words that we are familiar with, or the experiences that we are familiar with, structure, stature, matter, discipline, authority, and resistance, together with some of the ones that you can see here, duty, discipline, tradition. And due to its challenging nature, Saturn is classified as a malefic. Uranus was discovered on the 13th of March, 1781, by William Herschel, and the first new planet to be discovered outside the old or previous paradigm in centuries. It therefore shattered the Saturnian prototype. This is a very important concept between the two of them. Amongst its many eccentricities is the unique axial or vertical axial rotation as it orbits the Sun. It rolls like a ball versus spinning like a top, like the other planets. Its naming caused controversy over time as well. It was first named the Georgium Sidious after King George III of England, and later formally named Uranus after the mythological sky god. It is therefore associated with astrology, astronomy, and aviation. A number of astrologers have proposed that it's the embodiment of Prometheus, the rebel who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. In this we see Uranus's maverick boldness and pioneering spirit. His qualities are rather unorthodox, and as you can see, the freedom, change, innovation, individuality, and the unexpected or the sudden, incontinuous are some of its qualities. We can therefore see a vast contrast between their essential natures. Stability and security, Saturn, versus instability and uncertainty, Uranus, resistance and electricity, the old versus the new. They are formidable opponents and both quite dogmatic in their stance. This disparity leads to great tension and stress. Something needs to give, which usually happens through sharp and very sudden change. If incorporated successfully and readily and at its best, it comes with great release and reorientation. Robert Hand, whom himself was born with a Saturn-Uranus opposition, wrote, "Achieving a balance between the Saturn energy of order, predictability, and the Uranus energy of change and original experience is one of the greatest challenges in life." However, also embedded in this challenge is and in this promise is superb innovation, breakthroughs, and genius. It certainly is the energy of getting unstuck. That's not part of the presentation, but we'll enjoy it anyway. Come closer to the speaker. Fine, we'll do that. Right, so now that we are unstuck, Uranus discovery. Does it surprise us that Uranus was discovered over a period in opposition to Saturn? There are some noteworthy correlations between their respective cycles. And this may confuse a few of us, so I will mention the rings that I'm speaking about. A full Saturn cycle takes 29 years, and a quarter cycle, 7 years. A full Uranus cycle is 84 years, and 7 years per sign. We are now speaking about that second circle. This results in the context of individual life cycles in very important periods where their cycles are at similar points or at critical points simultaneously. When we look at Wheel 3, we'll see at the age of 21, where individuals are generally given freedom as well as responsibility. Uranus has done a quarter of its round, squaring its natal position, whereas Saturn will be 3/4 of its round to its first return. The ages 42 to 44, a period generally known as midlife crisis. We are now on the on the fourth wheel. We see that Uranus is halfway to its first return, half of its cycle, and soon after, Saturn halfway to its second return. It is widely observed, even outside the astrological circles, that these are distinct milestones in our development and times that cause great change and reorientation. As per usual, the hard aspects are more difficult to handle and manage. However, as you will see from the examples, that even the trines are not for the faint-hearted. We are currently, since the end of 2016, in a trine phase, and we have the last of the series to be had in August 2018. So we've got one more to go. In one of the most shocking US elections in modern political history, Donald Trump has defeated Hillary Clinton. That was said by Time.com. Couldn't resist that, right? Donald Trump was inaugurated during this trine period, 20th of January 2017. It was a time of adjustment and reorientation. We actually had a discussion last night over dinner, and some people are still adjusting and reorientating. At the very similar time, and over the same period, the Indian government, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, announced the controversial Indian currency demonetization, note bandy, by withdrawing the 500 and 1,000 Indian rupee notes, the old notes, with immediate effect, I believe, right? So, great and sudden change. Soon thereafter, in November, and during the most recent contact, Bitcoin broke through the 10,000 US dollar barrier during this trine. And, interestingly enough, during the previous opposition period, Bitcoin was birthed, 3rd of January 2009. We therefore see that global and financial changes are recurring themes and a result of these two rivals. Now we go on to Warren Buffett. I think this has become quite a famous saying of his. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to break it down. This statement of Warren Buffett was made in relation to the Solomon Brothers Treasury bond scandal. Just prior to that, though, in October 1987, and for those of you maybe invested in the stock markets over the time or interested in it, you will know that that day the financial markets plummeted, and it was received with shock and horror, a day now known as Black Monday. More recently, September 2008, during the opposition period, the Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. This was during this opposition period. And the day, as you can see from the chart, was brought into sharp focus by the full moon. 14 days later, during the next new moon, the financial markets actually crashed, which sparked the biggest recession since the Great Depression. At that same time, or the November, Barack Obama was inaugurated as President of the United States. And in true Saturn Uranus form, his election too changed the status quo, as he was the first African American to be elected to this position. His presidency was put under immediate pressure dealing with the financial crisis. So let's look at two personalities that I found interesting and went over that are born with this imprint and went through big changes when these Saturn Uranus were activated. Firstly, Rajneesh, born Chandramohan Jain, was born on the 11th of December 1931. He was an Indian mystic, charismatic guru, philosopher, writer, and founder and head of the Rajneesh movement. He was an advocate of capitalism and outspoken critic of Mahatma Gandhi and Hindu Orthodox religion. He had an open attitude towards human sexuality and an outspoken stance way ahead of its time in this regard as well. He certainly did challenge the status quo. I've put his natal chart in the center and two events over the periods, lifetime or life-changing periods in the second and the third wheel. Love him or hate him, as the saying goes, Osho was born into a Saturn-Uranus trine. May 1971, this is the mid-wheel. During his midlife years, he presented himself the title and name Bhagavan, Blessed One. He then also made public his enlightenment, which he said to have attained in 1953. This thing about name changing, sudden, etc., is quite usual, or was quite usual. As we all know, he changed, or he was known as Osho as well. So in this middle wheel, during the midlife years, transiting Saturn, squaring natal Saturn, and transiting Uranus, therefore opposite natal Saturn. The outer wheel depicts the day of his death, on the 19th of January, 1990. It is stated that he died from a congested heart attack. I found that quite... the words even describing the Saturn-Uranus. And it happened over his second Saturn return, when Saturn also squared his natal Uranus. Winston Churchill was a controversial British statesman, politician, army officer, and writer. He had one foot in the future and one foot in the past. Winston Churchill said, "To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often." Is it any surprise then to see that he was born over a Saturn-Uranus opposition? The middle wheel depicts 1925, April to be exact, during Churchill's transiting Saturn square natal Saturn and natal Uranus. Here he reintroduced the gold standard. The consequences led to the British pound being too strong for effective exporting and resulted in strikes in 1926. So we have this whole financial theme coming through again. The outer wheel. Churchill was on the far right of British politics over India, and his views on India and Mahatma Gandhi were abhorrent. This was a statement made by Charmley. The activation of his Saturn return, and therefore Saturn opposing Uranus in 1933, saw great controversy over the India Bill, and Winston Churchill was accused of attempting to disrupt government, the politics. At this juncture, he made a very sharp and quick decision to break away from Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin over the India independence. This must be my favorite slide, and saying, every revolution evaporates and leaves behind only the slime of a new bureaucracy. Kafka sums up the evolutionary cycle of change embedded in the Saturn-Uranus promise, where every new ultimately becomes the new old and requires a refresher. What then can we do to facilitate or support us in this process? How can we strive, in as much as we possibly do have a say, controversial, right, in this matter, to create a life that has structure and discipline, purpose, combined with freedom and some choice? The answer may well be, again, in as much as we possibly can, make the needed changes timeously. Embrace the changes in your life and create some choices for yourself throughout your life. I thank you.